Okay. Okay. Very good. Welcome everyone to this WP Engine webinar on this very fine Tuesday. I'm presuming everyone's dialing in on Tuesday. If we've got any attendees from maybe across the pond to our east, maybe you're dialing in on your Monday, but you're still welcome here as well. The topic for today is mastering the art of buying and selling a web agency. A really interesting topic, actually, one that came through on the WP Australia Slack about a month or so ago. Ricky Blacker, if you know Ricky, he works here at WP Engine, very engaged in the Australian WordPress community. Mentioned that the questions about buying and selling, an agency for growth or for exit, it kicked off in the Slack, and some really good conversations came out of that. And we thought it'd be a good idea to get everyone together and open that conversation up, get a few experts in, have a good conversation. So I think it's going to be good today. But my name is Rob Stinson. I'm one of the product marketing managers at WP Engine. And if you're familiar with tools like advanced custom fields, local, the WP Engine headless platform, I'm very lucky to actually get to work with a bunch of the product teams that work on those. And as you can imagine, those particular products are very agency focused. So agencies is kind of my world. I had my own agency back in the day. I worked for a larger agency, and I work day to day with agencies right now at WP Engine. But I haven't bought or sold an agency myself personally. So I'm quite excited for today because I think I'm going to actually learn some stuff as well. So if you see me like leaning down to the side, taking notes, it's because I'm learning things as well. But let's just have a little look at some housekeeping before we kick off and before we meet our panelists. First of all, a reminder that this is going to be recorded today, which is great. In about 24 hours or so, if you're a registered attendee, which I presume you all are, you'll get an email with a link to the recording as well, so you can check it out or forward it to sort of friends and colleagues after the fact. Secondly, the chat feature isn't available today during the webinar, but we do encourage you to send your questions through to our panelists. You should see a Q&A feature or button somewhere at the bottom of your screen. If you click that throughout the session, if a question pops into your mind, you're like, oh, I'd love to ask this or hear what they have to say about such and such, put it in there, and we're going to round all those up at the end and then have a bit of a Q&A session, 10 or 15 minutes at the end. And we hope to be able to cover as many of those that come through as we possibly can. Thirdly, very shortly or right now, you're going to see a poll question pop up on your screen, which just simply asks, why are you here? Are you thinking of buying an agency, thinking of selling an agency, you're thinking about it all, or you're just here to learn? Just curious. We'd love to know what's motivated you, or at least captured your attention for this particular topic. But let's have a look at the agenda briefly, and then we'll go and meet our panelists. Welcome introductions. We'll kick that off, but then we're going to have a panel and Q&A. I expect that we're going to have about 45 minutes today together. We've got the time available to us to extend it up to an hour if we need. But a chunk of that is going to spend talking to our panelists, asking them some questions, unpacking both sides of the buy and sell equation. Again, we'll have a bit of audience Q&A towards the end, maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and then we'll wrap things up and close. So let's meet our panelists. Really solid panelist group here today. Very excited, actually. We've got Cameron from Shorty Designs, Luke from Made Neat, and Gary from Phase 3 Ecom. Now, if you're in Australia and you've attended maybe a WordCamp at some point over the last decade, you've probably met at least one of these guys. They're very engaged in the agency and WordPress sort of ecosystem and industry, particularly in Australia. So really excited, and I've got a little bit of a preview into their world when it comes to the whole buying and selling of agencies. And these guys have got some really good experience. So I expect we're going to learn some good stuff today. But I want them to, if you don't mind, fellas, if you don't mind introducing yourself, saying hi, let us know maybe where you're dialing in from, and then briefly, perhaps a little snippet of the story of your experience with buying and selling an agency. Luke, is it all right if we throw to you, mate?
Sure, straight off the bat, look at that. So I'm dialing in from Noosa in Queensland, Australia. Beautiful part of the world if you want to take a look. It was unfortunately about 34 degrees here yesterday. It's a bit cooler today, so those that might be dialing in from older locations, come and visit. So I have been in the web industry since 1999 when I built my first website, but I've only been in the agency area since 2011. So I was a freelancer or solo for all the years prior to 2011. I had an agency which I sold in 2017. And then in 2019, I somehow ended up back in the agency game after acquiring one. So I have been on both sides of the coin, hoping I can share some insights from that with everyone today.
Very, very cool. I guess I'm about 20 minutes south of you, Luke. And yes, yesterday was 34 degrees, which is reasonable, but it was about like 100% humidity, which is atrocious. If you're familiar with Queensland weather, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Cameron, want to intro yourself?
Hi, I'm Cameron and I own Shorty Designs. I'm based in Victor Harbor, which is about 100 k's south of Adelaide. Formerly a Queenslander, but not there anymore. And yeah, I purchased Shorty Designs earlier this year. I'd been working at a larger agency for about 4 years, and Shorty Designs is one of the brands that they operated. And yeah, just over a year ago, the boss decided to retire and close down the business, and then ended up selling part of the business, including the Shorty Designs brand, to me. So yeah, that's how all that happened. I'm probably a little greener than some of the other folks on the panel here. You're still very new into running a business, but yeah, so that's my experience with buying and selling agencies.
Very good. And you're down in Adelaide. I think, Cam, you mentioned the other day that you were going to line up day 3 at the cricket, which I'm guessing all sort of went wrong because the cricket was finished by about 1 hour into day 3. Did you attend?
Day 2, I was there.
Oh,
So
you
I
did
saw
go day
Travis
2.
Head's ton. So, and then we
Oh,
took
that
like
was
five
worthwhile.
wickets in the evening session. So it was a really great day.
Oh, day 2 was good. That was worth it. Very good. Gary, intro yourself, mate.
Yeah, good afternoon, one and all. Yeah, Gary Wise. I'm based in Brisbane. Bit of a Queensland theme going on here today. I've been in the agency space since 2008. I've launched 3 separate branded agencies, acquired 4, and recently just sold 1.
So certainly not a single rodeo for you, mate. You've sounded like you've jumped around a few times on both sides of the equation, buying and selling. Very,
Yeah.
very cool. Excited again. Thank you so much for joining. There's a lot to cover, and this conversation can go in many different directions. Obviously, buying and selling, 2 sides of an equation, which is interesting. But I feel like we'll try and roughly split things down the middle. Let's start with a selling conversation. We'll see where that goes, and then we'll sort of maybe shift into the buying conversation, see where that goes. So starting with the idea of selling, I would presume that the motivation for selling an agency can be very varied. Someone, I don't know, maybe attendees have had the experience where it's the 24th of December and it's 10 p.m. and you're answering client tickets and you're just burned out and you're like, I'm selling this thing. Or you've had a great experience and you've built a fantastic business, but you're considering what's next. Like, again, the motivations I can imagine for selling any business in general, but an agency could be very, very varied. But Gary, just to you first, mate, I'm curious, like the moment where the thought, like, you know what, maybe I should sell this business, like that moment, that thought, like, what do you feel like is the first couple of questions you should be asking yourself?
Keeping it real simple, really dig deep on the why. Because I think the why is going to shape what the sale, in fact, looks like. For example, if you're looking for a quick exit because you're trying to take advantage of a new business opportunity, or there's another project you want to get involved with outside of the space, or there's an investment you want to make, or there's some reason why you need cash in a hurry to do something else. I think you've got to understand that why, because that will shape the sale. So if, for example, you're looking for a quick sale, then you're going to be what's called a motivated buyer. So you're probably going to be open to a lot more creative deals, and we'll talk about that, I know, in a little bit later. But if you're sort of going, you know what, I'm happy to stick around in the business, I'm happy to sit and wait for the right buyer, the right price, the right opportunity, the right time, then you're going to be less likely to be, jumping at the first offer or, rushing through the process. I think if you really understand why, that's the first step, because that's going to shape what you're going to do and what the sale is actually going to look like going forward.
No, very good. Luke, what do you think, mate? Particularly in the why part, like that first couple of questions you should be asking yourself when the idea of maybe I should sell crosses your mind.
Yeah, definitely. The why is the really important place to start. It's your epicenter. It will filter out to everything in terms of your decision making there onwards. So, Gary, you nailed it there without a doubt. The why for me, to put a case in point, when I sold my last agency, was pretty much wrapped around that burnout facility, and it had come at a time when my first child had recently been born, and it was just a lot to handle, this business and this personal life. And I was looking at, did I want to continue down this route in this agency? Did I imagine myself here in another 10 years' time doing what I'm doing now? And the immediate instant answer was no, hell no. And so that's when I started to look at the business and go, well, what can I do to reshape it into something that would be a hell yes in 10 years' time? And there was nothing that I could do. I loved my team. They were amazing. There were a number of clients which were great to work with, but running a full service creative agency, which is what I had, was just, it was too much. It was like running 3 separate businesses. And so the why for me was to have more time at home with my child and my growing family. And I didn't see a way that I could achieve that quickly without letting go of the business. So with that in mind, the discovery and the approach that I took was to, as a motivated seller, find someone that would acquire the business. So I actually went to market to find someone. I'd had people coming around, sniffing in the past, and so I started with them. But yeah, my motivation was the other way around, to go and find a seller so that I could move this on and focus on my family life.
And that's awesome. Like the concept of burnout or like being worn out in especially like service-based businesses is not an uncommon experience. But I appreciate how like structured you were with like your approach. Like it wasn't just I'm burnt out, I gotta get rid of this thing. Like you really did consider like, well, where do I want to be, and like can I get there under the current circumstances? Like that's really good. The interesting thing about agency and service-based businesses, and I want to dig into the area. We'll probably dig into valuation a little bit throughout this whole session. But the thing about agencies is that we've all had our feast and our famine cycles. I think agencies in general these days do a better job of establishing recurring revenue, perhaps than maybe like a decade or so. And we saw bigger peaks and bigger troughs, but valuing a business can be tricky. Cam, I don't know if you have any insights on, especially still on those early stages when, from a selling perspective, but I know that you're more experienced in the buying side, but in those early phases, how to think about how does this business, from a sellable perspective, get valued?
Yeah, well, I mean, it kind of goes off what Gary and Luke have just said. It really depends on why the business is being acquired and what the motivations are behind it. Like if someone came knocking on my door, 2 minutes after this webinar ends and says, "Hey, I want to buy your business," like that is going to look a lot different to if I was in Luke's position from a few years ago and being like, "I'm really burnt out. I need to get this off my plate." So like something I've tended to hear seems to be around double annual revenue seems to be something that's I'm hearing a lot as a bit of a ballpark. But yeah, it really comes down to like, yeah, what the actual context of what the the sale really is. Like, yeah, whether it's an owner looking to get out, whether it's, an offer that's come across their door that, is too good to turn down. So, yeah, and obviously different structures and different types of, offers might, be more or less attractive and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's always a number, right? If someone was to knock on our door right now and offer us something, there's a number there that we would probably say yes to. Gary, what about you, mate? Like you've been through this process a number of times. I think you said you've acquired 4 times and sold multiple as well. When you're thinking about valuation, just again at this earlier stage, I'm sure with the process of due diligence and you start to get access to financial records and everything like that, numbers are fine-tuned. But how in general do we think about valuing an agency business for sale?
Well,
Is this
clearly it is.
big it depends question?
Yeah, it's a big long piece of string, this one, but
Yeah.
there is 2 sides to the coin. There is the buyer's perspective and there's the seller's perspective. Clearly they're going to be different. That's just the way buying and selling is, and it doesn't matter whether you're talking agencies or whether you're talking any other type of business. I think the trap for a lot of business owners is that they'll sort of run, because they're told to, straight to the P&L, straight to the balance sheet, have a look at what the numbers say. And in my experience, agencies are typically, love to hear what the rest of the panel has to say on this too, but typically from what I've seen, and even though we've only done 4 acquisitions, we've probably looked at 20, maybe 30 even businesses over the years. I can tell you that the accounting processes of agencies is usually pretty ordinary. So you can't run, Luke's laughing there. You can't just go and typically dig up a set of profit and loss and balance sheets numbers and be able to understand the value of a business based around those particular documents. You've got to remember they are accounting documents for legal purposes. They're not really designed to be valuation documents. So at the end of the day, there's 2 key things we do look for when valuing a business for either sale or purchase, and that really comes down to how is the business generating the revenue. Is it purely on the back of the business owner's shoe leather by going out into the marketplace and generating hype and buzz and bringing business through? Or is there a highly tuned, defined sales and marketing process by which the business owner is not part of that process? Therefore, the business is operating as a business. It's not just being operated by the sole operator. So from a sales point of view, if you're selling a business that is a lot more systemized, a lot more sales and marketing driven, that's going to have a higher value, so to speak, than a business that is pretty much just the back end of the output of the owner. So I think that's the starting point, is identify what you're actually selling. Is it a set of systems and processes that can be run as a business and it doesn't involve you? That's going to be at the top end. That's what I'd call a 3. Or is it a 1, which involves the business owner doing absolutely everything, answering every single email, answering every single phone call, having to write every single deal, make every single pixel on the website, or whatever services you're offering. So there's one end of the scale, there's the other end of the scale.
No, very good insights. Like Luke, I want to double question here. Like again, like do you have any insights in general on the valuation question? How would you think about valuating an agency? But going into what Gary was just talking about there, like understanding the structure or the pipeline or whatever, how business is generated and then executed on in the business. I presume, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Gary, but you're kind of saying that like if it's all about the founder and he or she is the ultimate point of failure, obviously if there's the sale occurs, then that person's out now, and what happens to the business versus a more systemized and process generated business. If we think about, all right, I want to sell my agency, I'm giving myself a 3 to 6 month window where I want to sort of achieve a sale. That would be ideal. What can you do in those months, or what should you do, or should you do nothing, but maybe to build the business and gear the business more towards something that is a little bit more what Gary was describing there, that is more process and system dependent versus sort of like single person dependent. So I get two questions. Valuation question. Any thoughts and insights on that? But then how should we think about preparing our business for sale for that a 3 to 6 month window? But what can be achieved in that time frame?
Yeah, what Gary said, totally agree with. To put it another way, if you ripped that owner out of the business, would it survive? Literally, right now, if you took that person out, what would happen? Would it continue? Would it thrive, or would it crumble? That single point of failure is the first thing you need to look at. And that will give you an assessment on the business, because if you can take that person out and it continues and thrives, then you're taking over a great business that you can integrate or keep separate, whatever your plans might be, and grow it from there. But if it fails, the value of that means you have to put more effort in order to keep the wheels in motion, let alone grow that business. So in terms of valuation, what I've looked at, which has been mentioned in the description of this webinar, is monthly recurring revenue. What is it? Who's paying for it? What are the services that are associated to it? Then looking at the client base, for me, that was really important when I acquired Made Neat. I was looking at the client base, who's already there, and working out, determining, are they being underserved? What are the opportunities to work with this existing client base? What are the services that they're offering? Do they align with what I can offer? Who in the team can actually manage those services? Really, it's just assessing it to go, if I took this on, am I going to sink or am I going to swim?
Mm-hmm.
And that really helps you to get a handle on to, one, is this an interesting business that you want to acquire? And two, what sort of value are you looking? So hopefully that will shed a little bit light in terms of the ability to the value of the business. Tidy books as well. I know, Gary, you were saying accounting is a legal requirement, but I was shaking my head earlier. I've taken a look at some books before, and you've gone, how do you even keep tabs on your own business to know where things are being successful and where things aren't? It's messy. To give an example, with our business, we've broken down the core services on our P&L, so we can understand on a quarterly, annual basis how those services are performing compared to the previous quarter or the previous year. And so that helps understand the ups and downs, the ebbs and flows of a service that's being requested by the market. And it's because of that we've seen some really strong growth in one area of our own business that I've then pumped more focus and effort into. So the monthly recurring revenue, for sure, processes, procedures, and what happens if you take that owner out of the picture? How does it go?
Yeah,
and to say what Cameron was saying in terms of 2 times annual revenue, sure, that's a good baseline to start a conversation. When you're discussing with the owner or owners, they're going to have a figure in their head of what they want in order to walk away from this, and you're going to have probably a figure, at best half of that that you want to spend in order to acquire this. So it's a matchmaking process. You are dating these people to work out whether you're a good fit or not.
No, that's very good. I love the way you both framed it, actually, like the idea of like, all right, if we rip the founder or the owner or even the core leadership team out of this business, what does it look like? Does it continue to function, thrive, grow? Cam, you've been on the other side of that, buying your agency, even more recent history. How much has that impacted, or how much did it impact your buying decisions on the other side, like seeing the operations and the way that, okay, I want to move the previous owners and I'm going to step in. Did you ask yourself those kinds of questions, and how much did that impact your purchasing decision?
Yeah, so like mine is probably a little bit of a unique situation where I purchased the business from within the business. And that's part of why I followed through with it when I was given the opportunity was, most of these clients already know me and they already work with me. And so in a lot of ways, it was, what was best for them to just keep working with the same person more or less. And so having the previous business owner not be involved anymore wasn't such a big deal because they were already used to working with me. And so, it kind of was important, just not quite necessarily in the same way.
Mhm.
Yeah, whereas I've definitely worked in other agencies where, the director is very much the figurehead of the business, and if you took them out of it, the business would die. So yeah, like it was definitely important for me, but maybe not quite in the way it might be for other businesses. But yeah, it was definitely one of the main reasons why I took it on when the opportunity came up was, yeah, because for the clients, already knowing me was, like it made it a lot less risky to take it on rather than, if it was someone completely fresh, coming in and, just being a whole new face.
Yeah, no, for sure. Key takeaway: try and become part of the agency that you're going to acquire, because you get insights onto a heck of a lot more of how the business is run. Good note.
But even on top of that, like, obviously it's not necessarily achievable to, just get hired by the business you
For
want to
sure.
run. But networking is really important. Like, if you've looked around at buying agencies, and like I've looked around at, for opportunities to look at other ones as well, since becoming a business owner. And it's amazing that the kinds of, businesses that are out there for sale, and like some of them, it's like, oh, I already know that person. Like I've tried to be really active in the local community here in Australia, and getting to know, like, the local communities is really important. And like, if you know someone well, like, it will make it a lot easier to try and facilitate a deal.
Mhm.
So yeah, like, you don't necessarily have to get hired, but I would definitely recommend, like, getting involved in local communities and getting to know other business owners, because you never know what's gonna come up, and like, when something does come up, it makes things so much easier.
Mhm.
I'll follow on from that point, Cameron. That's excellent. The relationships are really important. So I acquired Made Neat from an ex-competitor of mine from my previous agency, uh, who we did some partnership work with. So it wasn't like it was a negative competition between us. So we're supporting each other. But he reached out to me after hearing I'd sold my agency, and that conversation is how I acquired Made Neat. So those relationships are really important. He knew exactly who I was, what I did, he knew the quality of the work, and he knew that he could trust me with his client base to look after them and to look after the brands that he created. That made for a very easy conversation about this acquisition. And I've had some awkward ones in the past, but that trust, that relationship that was already there makes a hell of a difference. So, yeah, definitely agree with that, Cameron.
That's a really good point from both of you. The trust thing in general, just knowing the person. But I love, Luke, what you said there. Like, the seller can trust the buyer to look after their clients. Like, if you're an agency and you've been working with your clients who you've brought on, you've onboarded, you've served, you've done great work with, you've had highs, maybe a few lows, like, you've got a relationship and also a reputation, right, with them, and knowing that, okay, I can trust the person that's going to buy this. Like, that's a really interesting insight. I'm thinking about, okay, so the why and valuations and everything, and like starting to lean towards, all right, I'm going to think about selling and taking my agency to market. We've touched on the value of being engaged in like a community or an ecosystem or an industry, however that happens. And I would presume that many of your deals that you have done have been through a relationship versus like you went to a businesses for sale website and sliders and filters and found a couple. Is that correct? I'm seeing a couple of nods that like that relationship thing is massive. But extending the taking my agency to market idea is many agencies, and I recall mine when I ran it many years ago, I did a bit of everything, right? I did web design, I did web development, I did some marketing stuff. Even, I mean, at the start, I was saying yes to everything. But what I provided to my clients was fairly broad. And, some agencies are run as like full service agencies. Others are much more narrowed. Like I know over the last maybe 5 or 6 years, there's been a lot of service agencies, I guess, but they're like very focused on monthly retainer WordPress maintenance. So a very focused offering, right? And that's what the brand and everything is orientated around. If you're in the space where your agency does a number of things, is it better to go to market with all of the things, or to perhaps elevate one of the main areas of the business because it's just a clearer and more focused and punchy, particularly if it's got MRR attached to it? Like, how do you think about that? Is it at the point of sale, is it better to be like, all right, cool, let's go forward with our strengths, or let's go forward with the breadth of all that we offer? I mean, Gary, do you have any thoughts?
Well, yeah, I think again, you've got to understand that as a seller, more than likely, and this is again just my experience, more than likely you're selling into an existing business owner in the space. It's not going to be Mike and Sarah, who've never been in the industry before, coming in and purchasing a business. It's in my experience, it's existing owners buying other businesses, and they're buying them for a couple of different reasons. They're typically buying them as a bolt-on, so they'll just simply take that business. They'll buy the business, but they'll merge it. So it's just an extension. So they're just buying basically recurring revenue. So they're buying a client list. And then the other one then is buying it as an ongoing concern, where you're purchasing it as a business, as a brand. You're going to continue to run the brand. So again, it comes down to the buyer. What's the buyer? What's their why? Why are they buying it? Are they looking purely for a customer extension? So they're looking to increase bolstering their numbers, so they got more clients. Are they looking to buy it as an ongoing concern where they'll run it as a separate business? So if they're buying it as an ongoing concern, then all the services have to sort of, isn't as important to line it up. But if they're looking to bolt it on, then they may be bolting on services that they don't want. In one of our experiences, we purchased an agency that did a lot of email marketing. One of the first things we did in the first couple of months was actually sold off the email marketing side of the business. So we purchased this and then moved it on. So we didn't want to clutter up our own service offering and get involved in email. We just spent years getting out of it. We didn't want to instantly get back into it. Same thing with little things like domain name management and DNS, and some people want to be involved with that as a full service, others don't. So I think it comes down to me personally. Again, know why you're purchasing the business. We also purchased the business for a geographical expansion. So we had customers all the way down sort of the East Coast, all the way down to sort of Sydney, Melbourne. And we wanted to sort of spread north. So we bought a business in Queensland further up the road to give us a geographical expansion, which gave us a little bit more reach. So again, it comes down to why the buyer is buying it, as to whether you should strip it down, leave it as it is. But I think ultimately, you also need to know who you want to sell to, because that will then enable you to picture the person you want to sell it to and position the business, package the business, as prepare it for sale for the best way it can possibly be for the target buyer.
No, very good. This is great, guys. I want to flip to the other side of our equation now, the buying side, and just really led into that perfectly, Gary. Cam, I guess, speaking from your own experience, like what were your motivations for buying, and like what were those points that really drove the decision for you and helped you come to the decision? But then also in general, where you're seeing it, like you're very involved in the industry, what do you hear on the ground when people come to purchase an agency, and like what is it that is motivating them?
Yeah, so for me, it was, again, a bit of a unique situation in that, the business I was working for was closing down, and it was a little bit of a fire sale to, get this brand off the books, so to speak, and but still, finding something to help the clients move forward with the business not being there anymore. And so like it made a lot of sense for the clients because you had that consistent person they were already dealing with still managing them, and also for me it meant that I didn't have to go and find a job. And like I live 100 k's from Adelaide. If I was to get an agency job, I might have to be making that trip into Adelaide every day, and I don't particularly want to do that. So, um, yeah, so like, when I weighed up those sort of things, it made too much sense to turn down. Yeah, so um, like I have been looking at potentially other opportunities as well, and like for me personally at the moment, if I was to purchase something, it would really just to be to accelerate growth. Like obviously, coming into business for the first time, starts slow, even though I've inherited clients and, I'm not exactly starting from zero. It's still not the same as, getting a nice developer salary at a large agency. So for me, like as I'm looking for potential opportunities elsewhere at the moment, for me, it's accelerating growth, particularly around recurring monthly stuff. Um, like, um, you know, and there's some businesses like the real focus of what the benefit of buying might be different. Like if like some businesses, the brand is really important and has a lot of authority, whereas other businesses, it might be the client base or a monthly recurring revenue that's really important. Like for me, if I was to buy another agency, I wouldn't look to maintain the existing brand. I'd look to, integrate it into my own systems and, just let the brand die because I've already got something unless it had more authority than the one I already have. But either way, I'd still be looking to bring it all in under the one roof. So like that's what I'm looking for at the moment. Like other people might have a more short-term focus in mind. They might see some sort of growth opportunity or have some, thoughts about the stock market or something, and they want to buy something and then flip it quickly for a profit. If people think like that. I don't know how well that works in the agency space. But yeah, like for me, as I look at the market right now, it's trying to like I've got goals that I have in mind for where I want the business to be, in the short term and then the long term. And any buying I'm considering is whether it aligns with those, revenue goals or not.
Yeah, no, very good. And that injection of growth, which you're talking about, is interesting, and presumably is the main motivation always for the acquisition of an agency. Maybe there's some IP or something in the background that's valuable, but presuming that, like, all right, we want to grow, and acquiring is an answer to growth, right? So I'm interested in like the dichotomy between organic growth or growth through acquisition, growth through purchasing an agency. Luke, do you have any perspective on like if someone's in that position, like, all right, over the next 12 months, we want to, where agency is here and we want to get to here. Again, I know this is it depends question, but like, what are the sorts of things folks should be asking themselves about? Like, oh, we can get there organically, or we can get there through acquisition. What should they be thinking about to make that decision?
Sure. So, a little bit like Cameron, I have been looking at various businesses over the last 10 months or so to acquire and grow my client base. And the the core reason I'm looking at the acquisition as opposed to organically is because we've got our system and processes down pat. So I know that if I add another 50, 100, 150 clients to our books, we can cope with it. There might be a couple of extra team members that we have to bring on to handle certain aspects, but our processes are there. So we bring someone in, there's our process, done. If you're at that stage, the acquisition route is really attractive because you can grow your numbers quite substantially.
Mm.
We are not a full service creative agency. So we design, develop, host, maintain, and secure our clients' websites across Australia and overseas. Branding and identity, don't touch it. We've got the skills in-house, so we can support clients if they need it, but it's not a service we offer. Digital marketing, We don't offer that. And I remember I said I had a full service creative agency. I learned the first time, don't want to go back there. So we sit nicely in this middle part and let others handle that. So with that in mind, it means that we can grow our client base. We can acquire and deal with that because it's just this service offering that we've got there. Organically, we have been growing and we haven't pumped that. We have run some tests, but as Cameron was mentioning before, about ditching a brand when you're acquiring it, that's also one of the benefits I see of acquiring an agency, a business, because of the brands. They've got the reputation, which means the clients are staying within that circle. Yes, you need to do an assessment about the strength of that brand. If you're going to be acquiring a business that has a stronger brand than yourself, you've got some heavy questions to answer as to what to do moving forward. I had somebody that was interested in our business and they found that our brand was actually stronger in the marketplace than theirs. And they were going, we'll run the companies separately for the first 12 months so I can get a handle on the client base, and then I merge my clients into yours and keep your brand. So it can happen either direction, but the organic growth is great and should always be there in the background. But if you're really looking to level things up and you've got that strength, that baseline in your processes, procedures, and your team, that acquisition can just level you up really quickly.
Yeah, Gary, do you have any thoughts on that? The acquisition as a lever for growth versus the just let's keep going with organic growth.
Yeah, not much more to add than what Luke just said there. Well summed up. For us, yes, organic growth was incredibly important. We have a marketing side to our business and always have had. Therefore, and I don't introduce that as into the conversation for other than we know how to market, meaning we could go and create demand, we can go and create and sell our services. So that's how essentially the business grew, was through our own marketing efforts. Obviously on the ground efforts, me doing what I needed to do to bring the business through the door. But yeah, it was then accelerating the growth through acquisition was our strategy. So that's why we went hard against the acquisition model, but at the same time maintained our organic growth, and combining the two has really served us well, because you're not going to do an acquisition, you got to wait for the right opportunities. And I think that's the big thing, is you got to be prepared to have a look. You got to be prepared to walk away. Not every deal is going to be right. So, just constantly stay in the market, assess it, each one on its own merits. But at the same time, you need to take care of that growth. But as Luke said, if you've got robust systems and processes, it may just be a resources issue. And from that perspective, acquisition makes perfect sense. But if you're not systemized and not process driven, then acquisition may not necessarily be the path for you, because you don't have the base by which to grow a large number of clients very quickly.
Great point. And even again, like your other point about like being prepared to walk away, I think you said you've acquired 4 but assessed 30, so obviously you've walked away from a few, I would presume. Like, are there any red flags that like you have seen pop up? Everyone loves a red flag question, right? What is it like if we're looking to buy, we're looking to acquire for growth? Are there just some things that through your experience, like, oh, I wish I knew that on my first round, because I would have spotted that, if I'd spotted that, I would have just backed away. Red flags. Any red flags that you've come to sort of experience?
I'll throw my big red flag out there, and it's the word churn. This can be a real tough one, but it's part of your due diligence. You've got to understand the churn rate with the business, because every business has a churn rate. No business maintains 100% of its clients throughout the year. Us included, for a number of different reasons. The client will move on through no fault of your own. for 100 different reasons, right? It doesn't really matter the reason, but there's going to be churn. There's going to be natural churn. There's going to be churn where the business, may have not fulfilled its obligations to the client and the client's decided to move on. During your due diligence process, you have to try and uncover the churn rate. You have to uncover what the volume of customers coming in versus the volume of customers going out is, because that really does sort of signal a lot to what you're purchasing. Because if they can't hold on to the clients, then probably the clients you're going to purchase aren't going to remain. And if there's a higher than what I would call normal churn rate, then there's something you've got to uncover to find out the reason why. Because the last thing you want to be buying is a depreciating asset.
Yeah, that's a really good point. A question that's come through in the Q&A feature, actually, like someone's asked, like, buying particularly retainer clients, facilitating the transfer, but like, what if I buy the clients, buy the business, but then they just sort of leave straight away? Like, I feel like that's, especially like if you're new to the acquisition game, like they're like, what if we buy it, then everyone bails out immediately? Like, that's like a really real fear. And I think it comes back to, Gary, what you're talking about is like what is an acceptable churn rate? And that churn rate generally will probably persist because there's always natural churn. And then there's transition churn, like whenever one business fundamentally goes from one place to a new owner or whatever, there's always a bit of extra churn there. Like, you obviously try and map it out, be as smooth as you can, but there's just a bubble in there. I know, Luke or Cam, any thoughts on just a general way to approach that question of or that fear of, this looks good, or how do I know it looks good enough that, like, if I buy this business, like, what if everyone bails out? Like, it's a very, I guess, a broad question, but how can folks that are perhaps approaching this for the first time address that fear?
I'll jump in first. So firstly, Gary, your statement about churn is spot on. Definitely a red flag. I would query your statement about not the reason not being that too important. I would say understanding the reason for the churn is really important. Is it because they don't have the full service offering that the clients are seeking? Is it because they're not delivering on their service offering and their promise? Is it because of bad support, slow communication? Like, understanding that churn as best as you can with the data that you're able to get your hands on, and this is going back to the P&L and processes that we mentioned earlier, is really important, because that churn rate will help you understand where the low-hanging fruit is, what you might need to address. Now, then bringing in the statement about what happens if you remove the founder or the business owner, and how does the business go? Well, talking about brand as well earlier, if the brand is the person and you remove the person, then how does the stability, the structure, the foundation of their client base look? Are they going to jump ship because they're no longer getting expertise from Gary, they're now getting it from Luke? And so how does that change? One experience I did have, not so much in the agency game, but with a business that was selling to someone, and I was one of their clients. It was an accounting firm, and I had been with that accounting firm for at least 6 years. And the owner called me up one day out of the blue and just talked to me about his reason, the why, that he's now selling and who he has sold to and the reason he selected them, and that he was calling me personally to discuss this, to make me aware, and that he would be passing on my details so they could reach out to me and discuss what they do and what they offer. Now, this is a very laborious task when you've got a lot of clients, but it's a very powerful task because it primes the clients prior to them hearing from some brand new brand, person, agency, whatever it might be, of what's going on. Now, because of that, we gave this accounting firm a chance. Like, we trust this guy. He's told us why he's picked this accounting agency, and so we'll stick with them. We only stuck with them for 12 months and then moved on, mainly to do with their service offering, which is a point I'm bringing up here. You need to maintain that service level of expectation the client have been accustomed to. So Yes, it is a concern. Your deal might be structured in a way that if people jump ship within a certain period of time after your acquisition and it's through no fault of your own, then there might be a reduced payment or something along those kind of lines. It really just depends on how you've, structured your deal. But at the same time, the seller doesn't want you to screw up their business and therefore get less because you're doing a bad job. So there's a bit of a balancing act there, but ultimately it's really just making sure the client base understands the why, because the why is so important for everyone, and that includes your team members, not just your clients.
Great tactical tip. I love the idea, if you're a buyer or a seller, is being intentional, like, all right, if we do this deal, can we, I mean, maybe you even structured as like one of the points of the deal is that like we have a warm handover. But a seller, you call the client, you say why, and you introduce me. I love that. I think that's a fantastic tactic for helping reduce that potential transition churn. I want to ask Cam, especially because this is, we've got about a few minutes to go. I've got two more questions up my sleeve. But Cam, because this is recent history for you and you've taken over the operations of an agency, do you have any tips for like, on the other side of a purchase, and you hit the ground and you've got access to, the Slack and the Google accounts, you've got all the things. Any tips for this first initial months for like picking up the operations and getting things running as smoothly as soon as possible?
The key thing for me was to try and keep everything as similar as possible for the clients, like give them the smoothest experience into this new phase as you can. So like for me, it was, same prices. Like that was a big one. Like most of what I took on was like monthly recurring maintenance stuff. And so keeping all the prices the same just meant that all that they were doing was paying into a different bank account. Um, I was lucky from my end that like part of my role previously had been to set up a lot of the internal development processes. So I already had a lot of that in place and was able to just transition most of that and, improve some of that as well as I moved them over. But yeah, trying to keep things as easy as possible for the client so that you're avoiding that sort of churn. Like if you make things hard for the client, then, they're more likely to disappear on you. So like obviously the clients are, what's most important out of all of this. Like without clients, there's no business. So making sure that everything is as simple as easy as possible for them. Like sounds like Luke had a really good experience with the accounting transition, whether the service matched up or might sounds like it might be a bit different, but like that sort of thing of having that introduction, having those conversations with both the previous owner and them talking to the clients, explaining the situation, the new owner being able to introduce themselves and build that relationship before you've even started, and yeah, all those sort of things, like the less work clients have to do and the more assurance you can give them that things are going to stay the same or get better, then yeah, the better.
No, that's very good. I'm hearing as well that like, what you get that nice warm handover, good. And then in the early stages, like just make it as smooth and bumpless, as possible. And maybe even that means like retaining some of the previous processes, even if they aren't exactly the way that you want it to be, and introducing change later, just as the relationship is reestablished, versus like, cool, everyone, day one, welcome to the new company, we're your new owners. And where you do things like this, not like that, friction, right? So you don't have to ram home or rush the transition experience for the clients. One more open question, because it's come up a couple of times in the Q&A in different formats. And I think it's a bit of in response to something, Cameron, you said earlier. You sort of said like a double annual revenue thing, but people are asking like, are there any industry benchmarks? Like how do you set a price? And again, I know it depends and it's based on the buyer's motivation, but again, are there any industry benchmarks? Is there a general sort of process or if people love a good equation, or it's a way of thinking about putting a price on the value of a business when it's going to sale. Any final comments or elaborations on that point?
Yes, we have a very defined set of financial parameters when we're doing an evaluation on a business, and even preparing one for sale. Industry standards, look, it depends what road you go down. If you're going to engage a broker, the broker is always, in my experience, I have no issue with brokers. I'm not a broker hater. I'm not a lawyer hater. Had plenty of experience with them, but at the end of the day, they're going to probably over pitch if you're a seller. And obviously it's up to you to try and, uncover the real value of that business. If I was to give you a ballpark, I would be looking at, you need to be looking at somewhere around about 2.5 to 3 EBIT. So that's basically profit. 2.5 to 3 times profit. I think you're relatively on the money. And then based on your due diligence as the buyer, you then have to be able to justify your offer as to why you're going to be going in with less than asking price. I think that's the key thing, is really do your due diligence. Don't go in and start calling the baby ugly, because that's not the way to go about it. But you have to be able to justify your price just as much as the buyer, just as much as the seller has to justify their price.
Oh, very good. Luke, any thoughts on that point?
Definitely on the EBIT. There are actually, if people want to look it up, there are publicized ratios for 2024 for the EBIT multiples. So it's a good way to start looking at it. Again, if your books are not tidy, it's going to be hard to get accurate numbers that you can be confident at. So if somebody is looking at selling their business, clean your books up, make sure everything is filed correctly, categorized correctly, and then you can use these online calculators to work it out if your accounting software doesn't allow you to do that in itself. Yeah, look, that's a really good starting place for the conversation. And then that's when you start to open up the shell and look at how are they managing it internally, how are they handling their staff, have they got documented processes and procedures, what are the service providers they're using. You then start to look at whether the baby's ugly or not, and how you can adjust your offer. You want to be careful of the subprime mortgage situation that happened with the financial crisis, and I don't mean that in terms of getting a mortgage, but I mean in terms of what rubbish is packed in there in the client base. They might be shiny clients that they're showing you. Look at these are amazing ones. Behind them, they've got this plethora of clients that they should have fired a decade ago, but they're keeping there because there's some recurring revenue, and they're easy just to keep going and deal with the hassles of whatever their requests are at that time. So yeah, the EBITDA is definitely a good place to start, and then break it apart from there.
No, great points. Very, very good. Well, look, everyone, we are at time. I appreciate Gary, Cameron, Luke so much for joining us today. Again, this panel has a heck of a lot of experience on this topic, so hugely valuable. If you're watching this, be it live or in the recording, we have our WP Engine Agency Partner Program. If you're not part of this program and you are an agency, I truly encourage you to check this out. There are a lot of benefits to you, which are going to help you facilitate, your operations, the growth of your business. So really, that's the URL is wpengine.com/agency partner program. And if you want to follow Gary, Cameron, or Luke on their socials, you can find Cameron at Cameron Jones Web almost anywhere. I'm guessing that's at Facebook and X and Instagram or wherever. And you can find Luke and Gary on those LinkedIn links there. I think that is it. I appreciate everyone for joining today. The recording will be sent out sometime within the next day or two, and feel free to pass that on to anyone in the industry that you know and who might find value out of what we've covered today. Appreciate it, and thank you so much, and we'll see you at the next one. Bye.